I never expected a random guy at my gym to completely throw off my routine. For almost a year, my life had been painfully predictable. Wake up, work, gym, dinner, sleep, repeat. It wasn't a bad life, but it wasn't exactly exciting either. The gym was the one thing I never skipped. Every weekday at 6:30 sharp, I'd walk through the front doors, scan my membership card, put in my earbuds, and spend 90 minutes pretending the rest of the world didn't exist. I liked it that way. No unnecessary conversations, no distractions, no drama, just me and the weights. That routine lasted until Luis showed up. The first time I saw him, he was standing near the dumbbell rack, looking completely lost. He was tall, athletic, and honestly looked like someone who should have known exactly what he was doing in the gym. Dark hair, sharp jawline, broad shoulders. The problem was, he was holding a dumbbell upside down while staring at a machine like it was written in another language. I couldn't help laughing. He looked over immediately. Something funny? His voice had a playful edge to it. I pointed at the dumbbell. You're holding that backwards. He looked down. There's a right way to hold a dumbbell? I laughed harder. That was my first mistake, because the second I laughed, Luis smiled. And that smile was dangerous. The kind that made you immediately understand how someone could talk their way out of a speeding ticket or into somebody's phone number. Okay, he said. You got me. First day. Seriously? Seriously. You've never worked out before? He shrugged. Not in an actual gym. That surprised me. He looked like he'd been playing sports his entire life. I'm Jude. Luis. We shook hands. Then he nodded toward the machine. Can I ask a dumb question? You already did. He grinned. Can I ask another one? I should have walked away. Instead, I spent the next 10 minutes explaining how half the equipment worked. When I finally returned to my workout, I figured that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next day, Luis appeared again and somehow found me within 5 minutes. Hey, trainer. I looked up from my bench press. I'm not a trainer. Could have fooled me. He sat down on the bench beside mine. Question. I sighed. What's the question? Why does every machine look like a medieval torture device? That made me laugh again. Another mistake. Because Luis seemed to enjoy making me laugh. A lot. For the next week, he kept finding reasons to talk to me. At first it was gym questions. Then it became random conversations. Where did I work? What music did I listen to? How long had I lived in the city? What was my favorite movie? What was my least favorite exercise? Why did I always wear black? The questions never stopped. Neither did the flirting. At least, I thought it was flirting. The problem was, Luis flirted with literally everyone. The front desk employees, the smoothie bar girl, the older guy who cleaned the equipment. One afternoon, I watched him convince a 70-year-old woman to teach him proper stretching techniques. She looked ready to adopt him by the end of the conversation. So I told myself I was imagining things. Luis wasn't flirting with me. Luis was just naturally charming. Case closed. Then came Friday, the day that changed everything. I was finishing a set when somebody tapped my shoulder. I removed an earbud. Luis, of course. He was holding a water bottle and wearing that familiar grin. Need a favor? I immediately became suspicious. What kind of favor? He sat down beside me. The kind where you say yes. Not encouraging. Come on, Jude. I narrowed my eyes. How do you already know my answer? Because you're nice. I'm not. You helped me for an entire week. That's called being polite. Luis leaned closer. No, being polite would have lasted one day. His eyes held mine for a second longer than necessary. A weird little pause, one that made my stomach do something annoying. Then he smiled again. There it is. What? That look. What look? The one where you're pretending you don't like me. I nearly dropped my water bottle. Luis laughed, actually laughed, like my reaction had confirmed something. Relax, he said. I like you too. Before I could think of a response, he stood up. Then he casually dropped a bomb on me. Anyway, since we're basically friends now, I signed us up for the gym's partner challenge next month. My mouth fell open. You what? Louise started walking backward, still smiling. See you Monday, partner. And just like that, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving me standing there wondering what the hell I'd just gotten myself into. I spent the entire weekend trying not to think about Luis, which was impossible, because every time I opened Instagram, there he was. Apparently, we'd followed each other sometime during our first week of talking. I honestly couldn't remember when. What I did remember was seeing story after story of him living what looked like a ridiculously active life. Hiking, playing soccer, brunch with friends, some rooftop party, a dog that wasn't even his but appeared in half his photos. Meanwhile, my weekend consisted of grocery shopping, laundry, and arguing with myself over whether buying a second pizza counted as meal prep. By Monday, I was ready to pretend the whole partner challenge conversation never happened. Unfortunately, Luis wasn't. The second I walked into the gym, I heard someone shouting my name. Ladies and gentlemen, he's here. I stopped walking. Several people turned to look. I immediately regretted existing. Luis jogged over wearing a sleeveless shirt that should have been illegal. Please stop yelling. No can do, partner. There it is again. There what is? Partner. Luis grinned. Get used to it. I rolled my eyes. What exactly did you sign us up for? His smile somehow got bigger. That wasn't encouraging. 30-day fitness challenge. No. Too late. Luis, trust me. No. You haven't even heard the details. I don't need the details. You do. I don't. You really do. I stared at him. Luis stared back. Then he started laughing. You're impossible. I'm practical. You're grumpy. I'm realistic. You're adorable. I froze. Luis froze too. For about half a second. Then he casually grabbed a dumbbell. Anyway, my heart was beating a little faster than it should have been. Adorable. Who called another guy adorable? I spent the next 20 minutes convincing myself I had imagined it. The problem was Luis kept making that difficult. Every exercise somehow became an excuse to stand close to me. Every conversation somehow turned personal. And every time I looked at him, I caught him looking at me first. It wasn't subtle anymore, at least not to me. Still, I couldn't figure him out. One day he'd be flirting so obviously that I felt like everyone in the building could see it. The next day he'd casually mention some girl he'd gone out with months ago. Then he'd go right back to teasing me. The mixed signals were exhausting. A week later, things got worse. Or better, depending on how you looked at it. We were doing partner exercises for the challenge. Luis insisted. I complained. Luis ignored me, as usual. Medicine ball throws, he announced. I hate those. You hate everything. I don't hate everything. Name 3 things you like. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Luis burst out laughing. Exactly. I like coffee. That's 1. Sleeping. That's 2. Being left alone. Luis clutched his chest dramatically. Ouch. I threw the medicine ball at him. He caught it easily, still smiling. Then he tossed it back. For the next 15 minutes, we worked through the circuit. By the end, both of us were exhausted. Luis collapsed onto the floor. I sat beside him. For a rare moment, neither of us spoke. The gym buzzed around us, weights clanking, music playing, people talking. But somehow it felt weirdly quiet. Luis looked over. Sweat dampened his hair. His breathing was still heavy, and for some reason, I couldn't stop staring at him. You know something? His voice was softer than usual. What? I almost didn't come talk to you. That surprised me. Why? Luis looked away. You seemed intimidating. I laughed. Me? Yes, you. I'm 5'10" and own more books than furniture. Exactly. That doesn't make sense. It does to me. I shook my head. Luis smiled. Then his expression changed. Just slightly. Something more serious. I thought you'd tell me to leave you alone. For some reason, that hit me harder than it should have. Because I realized something. Luis actually cared what I thought. Way more than he'd ever admit. You annoy me constantly, I said. That's not what I asked. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The confidence, the jokes, the flirting. Behind all of it, there was genuine uncertainty. Like he wasn't completely sure where he stood with me. And honestly, neither was I. You can stay. Luis smiled. Not the teasing smile, not the self-assured smile. A different one. Smaller. Real. For a second, neither of us looked away. Then somebody nearby dropped a weight. The moment broke instantly. Luis stood up. Good. I stood too. Good? Because I'm definitely not going anywhere. The way he said it sent a strange warmth through my chest. And as we finished our workout together, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing between us. Something neither of us had talked about yet, but both of us could feel. By the 3rd week of the challenge, Luis had officially become part of my daily routine, which was a problem, because I liked my routines. And Luis was chaos disguised as a person. Every day brought something new. A new joke, a new story, a new reason for him to somehow end up standing way too close to me. The worst part? I was getting used to it. Actually, scratch that. I was starting to look forward to it. One Tuesday evening, I arrived at the gym after a brutal day at work. Everything had gone wrong. Deadlines, meetings, emails. I was already annoyed before I walked through the front door. Luis noticed immediately. Uh-oh. I glanced at him. What? Grumpy Jude is here. I'm always grumpy. No, he pointed at me. Normal Grumpy Jude and extra Grumpy Jude are different people. I sighed. I'm fine. That's a lie. I grabbed a dumbbell. I'm working out. Luis followed me. Who annoyed you? No one. Was it work? I ignored him. Definitely work. Still ignored him. Luis nodded. Yep, Work. I couldn't help smiling, just a little. Unfortunately, he saw it. There it is. What? The smile. There wasn't a smile. There absolutely was. I rolled my eyes. Luis looked ridiculously proud of himself. For the next hour, he made it his personal mission to improve my mood. Terrible jokes, terrible impressions, terrible dance moves between sets. All terrible, yet somehow effective. By the time we finished, I was laughing more than I'd worked out. Louis stretched his arms over his head. Mission accomplished. What mission? You smiled. I regret it. No, you don't. Maybe I didn't. The realization was annoying. A few days later, the challenge organizers hosted a weekend event for everyone participating. Nothing serious, just outdoor fitness games, food trucks, and team competitions. I had zero interest in attending. Louis practically kidnapped me. You're coming. No. Yes. No. Already registered you. I stared at him. You really need to stop signing me up for things. He smiled. You'll thank me later. I doubted that. Saturday morning arrived far too quickly. The event was held at a large city park. There were dozens of teams everywhere. Music blasting, people exercising, energy drinks being handed out. My personal nightmare. Luis, meanwhile, looked like he'd been waiting his entire life for this moment. Isn't this awesome? No. You're smiling again. No, I'm not. You are. I wasn't. Probably. The day started harmlessly enough. Obstacle courses, relay races, fitness challenges, most of which Luis treated like the Olympics. The guy was ridiculously competitive. You realize there's no prize, right? There is. What? Pride. I laughed. Luis pointed dramatically. See? Another smile. Halfway through the afternoon, our team reached the final challenge. Partner carries. Of course. I immediately knew this was going to be a disaster. The instructor explained the rules. One partner carries the other across a marked distance. Then they switch. Simple. Luis looked at me, absolutely delighted. No. Oh, yes. No. Oh, yes. 5 minutes later, I was somehow hanging over Luis's shoulder while he jogged across a field. This is humiliating. Luis laughed. You don't weigh anything. That's not helping. You smell nice. My brain short-circuited. What? Luis immediately grinned. See? Got you. I climbed off his shoulder the second we reached the finish line. My face felt suspiciously warm. Luis looked entirely too pleased with himself. The problem wasn't the joke. The problem was how naturally he'd said it. As if complimenting me was normal. As if flirting with me was second nature. And maybe it was. Maybe he was just like this with everyone. That's what I kept telling myself. Then the rain started. Out of nowhere. 1 second the sky was clear. The next, everyone was running for cover. People scattered toward tents and pavilions. Luis grabbed my wrist. Come on. The contact lasted barely 2 seconds, but I felt it anyway. He pulled me beneath a large shelter packed with other participants. Everyone laughed as the rain poured down. The storm was intense. Sheets of water, thunder in the distance. No one was going anywhere anytime soon. Luis stood beside me. close enough that our shoulders occasionally touched. Neither of us moved away. Outside, the rain hammered the pavement. Inside, conversations filled the air. For once, Luis wasn't talking. He was just standing there, looking out at the storm. The silence felt comfortable, easy, unexpected. Then he glanced at me. "Can I tell you something?" His voice was unusually serious. I looked over. "Sure." Luis hesitated, which almost never happened. Then he smiled slightly. "You know, when I first came to the gym, I waited. I wasn't actually looking for a workout partner." "No?" He shook his head. "I was looking for an excuse to talk to you." My heartbeat immediately doubled. The noise around us seemed to disappear. For a moment, I wasn't sure I'd heard him correctly. Luis held my gaze. Neither of us looked away. And for the first time since we'd met, the flirting didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt real, very real. Before I could respond, someone called his name from across the shelter. The moment shattered instantly. Luis looked away, then back at me, a small smile returning. But something had changed, because now I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said, or what he might have meant. The rainstorm ended. The problem was, the sentence Luis had dropped on me didn't. I wasn't actually looking for a workout partner. I was looking for an excuse to talk to you. Most people probably would have asked him what he meant. Most people would have gotten clarification. I wasn't most people. Instead, I spent the next 3 days overthinking every interaction we'd ever had. Every joke, every compliment, every time he'd stood too close, every time he'd looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. It was driving me insane, and Luis wasn't helping. Not even a little. Thursday evening, I was halfway through a workout when he appeared beside me carrying 2 protein shakes. He handed one over. "Peace offering." I stared at it. For what? For existing. That's surprisingly self-aware. He laughed, then sat beside me, the same way he always did, like it was completely normal, like there wasn't an unresolved conversation hanging over both of us. "You've been weird this week." I nearly choked on my drink. "What?" "You have." Luis pointed at me. "Less talking." "That's normal." "Less eye contact." "That's also normal." "And every time I get close, you suddenly become fascinated by the floor." I looked at the floor. Luis immediately started laughing. "See? You're impossible." "Maybe." The smile faded slightly. Then he leaned back against the wall. "What happened after the rain?" My stomach dropped. There it was, the conversation I'd been avoiding. I stared at the gym floor, suddenly fascinated by absolutely nothing. Luis sighed. "Jude." "What?" "Look at me." I didn't. A second later, he nudged my shoulder. "Jude." Finally, I looked up. Luis was watching me carefully. Not teasing, not joking, actually watching me. "You've been avoiding me. I'm literally sitting next to you. You know what I mean." Unfortunately, I did. I exhaled slowly. "You said something." "I know." "And then acted like you didn't." Luis looked away briefly, almost nervous, which was new. I wasn't sure if I should have said it. That surprised me. Luis always seemed confident. Always. Seeing uncertainty on his face felt strange. Human. Real. "What did you mean?" I asked quietly. For the first time since I'd met him, Lewis didn't answer immediately. Several seconds passed. The noise of the gym filled the silence. Weights clanging, music playing, people talking. Meanwhile, my heart was trying to escape my chest. Finally, he smiled. But it wasn't his usual smile. This one looked nervous. I meant exactly what I said. My pulse jumped. Lewis continued. The first day I saw you, you looked like you wanted everyone to leave you alone. I usually do. I know. That made him laugh softly. Then his expression settled again. But there was something about you. I swallowed. Luis looked directly at me. I wanted to know you. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air felt heavier somehow, different. And suddenly every joke, every compliment, every excuse he'd found to spend time with me started making a lot more sense. The problem was, I still didn't know exactly where this was going, and apparently neither did he, because Luis rubbed the back of his neck, something I'd only seen him do when he was uncomfortable. That probably sounded stupid. It didn't. His eyes met mine. No? I shook my head. No. A slow smile appeared, the real one, the one I was starting to like way too much. Good. Neither of us looked away. Then someone interrupted us. Of course. One of the challenge organizers called Luis across the room. He groaned dramatically. Saved by the bell. I laughed. Luis stood up, then paused. Hey. What? His smile returned. Dinner tomorrow? I blinked. Dinner? Yeah. You mean a date? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Both of us froze, for one terrifying second. Then Luis smiled, slowly. Do you want it to be? My entire brain stopped functioning. The gym disappeared. The people disappeared. Everything disappeared except the guy standing in front of me, waiting, looking surprisingly nervous. And for the first time since we'd met, the answer felt obvious. Maybe. Luis laughed, relief flooding his face. That's not a no. No, it definitely wasn't. I shook my head, then found myself smiling. A real smile, the kind he was always accusing me of hiding. Luis noticed immediately. Of course he did. There it is. What? Favorite smile. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't stop smiling, and neither could he. By the time he walked away, one thing had become very clear. Whatever this was between us wasn't just flirting anymore. It hadn't been for a while. And tomorrow night, for the first time, we'd finally stop pretending otherwise. I spent an embarrassing amount of time deciding what to wear for dinner, which should tell you everything you need to know. Because if it wasn't a date, then why was I standing in front of my closet changing shirts every 5 minutes? And if it was a date, well, that was an entirely different problem. At 7 o'clock sharp, my phone buzzed. Luis. Outside. Of course he was. I looked in the mirror one last time, then immediately regretted it. Then checked again. Then left before I could make things worse. When I stepped outside, Luis was leaning against his car. The second he saw me, he smiled. And for some reason, that smile hit harder than usual. Wow. I stopped walking. What? Luis looked me up and down. You clean up nice. My face immediately warmed. Don't start. I'm serious. That's worse. He laughed, then opened the passenger door for me. Get in, Jude. I climbed into the car before I could embarrass myself further. The drive started normally, mostly, meaning Luis talked enough for both of us. He told me about a guy at work who accidentally replied all to a company email. Then a story about his neighbor's dog stealing a birthday cake. Then somehow transitioned into ranking the worst gym exercises ever invented. Burpees should be illegal. I nodded. Agreed. They were created by someone who hated happiness. Also agreed. Luis pointed at me dramatically. See? This is why we get along. I laughed. And just like that, the nervousness eased. That's what Luis did. He made things feel easy. The restaurant turned out to be a small place near the waterfront. Nothing fancy, just warm lighting, good food, and a view of the city skyline. Honestly, it was perfect. We got a table by the window, ordered food, started talking. And somewhere between appetizers and dinner, I realized something. This felt different from the gym, different from our workouts, different from our usual conversations. For the first time, we weren't talking between sets, or rushing somewhere, or surrounded by noise. It was just us, actually getting to know each other. Luis told me about growing up with 3 older sisters, which explained a lot. They tortured me. I don't believe you. They absolutely did. You seem too confident. Luis laughed. That's because I survived. Then he asked about my family, my childhood, my first apartment, my terrible college jobs. Questions nobody usually asked. And when I answered, he actually listened. Really listened. Not waiting for his turn to speak. Not looking at his phone. Just listening. By the time dessert arrived, 2 hours had somehow disappeared. Neither of us seemed eager to leave. Luis stirred his drink, watching me over the rim of the glass. Then he smiled. What? I asked. Nothing. That's never true. He laughed, then leaned back in his chair. I was right. About? You. I narrowed my eyes. That doesn't explain anything. Luis shrugged. The first day we met, I thought you were interesting. I immediately looked away. He noticed. Of course he did. There you go again. What? Running away from compliments. I don't run away. You absolutely run away. I laughed. Luis smiled. Then his expression softened slightly. You know, you're a lot different than I expected. Good different or bad different? Definitely good. The way he said it made my chest tighten. Not because it was dramatic, not because it was overly romantic, because it sounded honest, simple, real, and somehow that felt more dangerous. After dinner, we decided to walk along the waterfront. The city lights reflected across the water. The evening air was cool, comfortable. For a while, neither of us spoke. We just walked, side by side, close enough that our shoulders occasionally brushed. Every single time, I noticed. Apparently, Luis did too, because eventually he smiled. You know, what? This would have been easier if you weren't so hard to read. I laughed. Me? Yes, you. I'm incredibly easy to read. Luis nearly tripped. No. I am. No, Jude, he pointed at me. You spent 3 weeks acting like you didn't know I was flirting with you. I looked away. Luis burst out laughing. See? I knew. Eventually, I knew. After approximately 14 business days. I couldn't even argue, because he was right, and unfortunately, he knew it. We reached a quieter section of the walkway. Fewer people. Less noise, the city lights glowing around us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Luis stopped walking. I turned toward him. His expression had changed again, more serious, more vulnerable. The version of him I was starting to see more often, the one hidden underneath all the jokes. "Can I ask you something?" My heartbeat sped up. "Sure." Luis hesitated, which immediately made me nervous. Then he looked directly at me. "When you thought I was flirting with you," I waited. His voice softened. "Were you hoping I was?" For a second, the world seemed to go completely quiet. No traffic, no conversations, no city noise, just him, standing there, waiting. And suddenly, every excuse I'd made for him disappeared. Every attempt to convince myself he was just being friendly. Every reason I'd tried not to hope. Gone, because the truth was embarrassingly obvious. I had been hoping. For a while, I met his eyes, then smiled. Yeah, Luis stared at me, then smiled too. The biggest smile I'd ever seen on his face. And somehow that made my heart race even faster. Neither of us looked away. Neither of us moved. The distance between us suddenly felt very small. And for the first time since we'd met, neither of us seemed interested in pretending anymore. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. We just stood there, looking at each other, both smiling like idiots. At least I was. Luis definitely was. "Wow," he said finally. "What? You actually admitted it." I laughed. "You asked." "I know." He shook his head. "But I was fully prepared for you to dodge the question." "That's fair. Very fair." We started walking again, neither of us in a hurry to get anywhere. The strange thing was that after finally being honest, everything felt easier, lighter, like we'd both been carrying around the same secret and finally put it down. Luis shoved his hands into his pockets. "So," I immediately became suspicious. "So, when exactly did you figure it out?" "Figure what out?" "That I liked you." I groaned. Luis laughed. "Come on. You first." "Nope." "Luis." "Nope." I shook my head. "You're impossible." Yet here you are. Unfortunately, he had a point. After another minute, I finally answered. "The partner challenge." His eyebrows lifted. "Really?" "Maybe." Luis grinned. "The shoulder carry?" I pointed at him. "Don't. You totally realized it during the shoulder carry. I hate you." "You absolutely realized it during the shoulder carry." I couldn't stop laughing. The worst part? He wasn't entirely wrong. Luis looked far too pleased with himself. "Okay," he said. "My turn." I waited. The first week. I blinked. "What?" "The first week." "Seriously?" He nodded. I knew pretty early. My heart skipped. "How?" Luis shrugged. "Because I kept looking for you." The answer was so simple it caught me off guard. No dramatic speech, no grand confession, just honesty. And somehow that felt even more meaningful. "You make that sound normal." It wasn't. I looked at him. For once, he seemed completely sincere. "I'd come into the gym and immediately look around for you." A smile tugged at my mouth. "Luis." "What?" "You're making this very difficult." He laughed. "Good." We reached the parking area near the waterfront. Neither of us had noticed how late it had gotten. Most of the crowds had disappeared. The city felt quieter now, more intimate. Luis stopped beside his car. I stopped too. Suddenly, the reality of the evening caught up with me. Because this wasn't just another workout or another conversation. This had been a date, an actual date. And judging by the smile on Lewis's face, he was thinking the exact same thing. I had fun tonight. His voice was softer than usual. Me too. Good. A brief silence followed. Not awkward, just important. The kind where both people know something is changing. Lewis glanced down, then back at me. For the first time since I met him, he looked genuinely nervous. And somehow, that made my own nerves worse. Can I ask one more question? I laughed. You've asked about 500 already. I'm aiming for 600. Of course you are. His smile appeared again, then faded slightly. Would you want to do this again? The question was simple, but the look in his eyes wasn't, because suddenly all the joking was gone. This mattered to him. The answer came easier than I expected. Yeah. Lewis exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath. Yeah? Yeah. His grin returned instantly, bright, relieved, almost boyish, and seeing it made something warm settle in my chest. Good. Good. Very good. I rolled my eyes. Luis laughed. Then we both lingered there longer than necessary, neither of us quite ready to leave. Eventually, he opened the passenger door for me. I should probably get you home. Probably. Otherwise, you'll turn into a pumpkin. I'm not sure that's how it works. Pretty sure it is. The drive back felt different, not because anything dramatic happened, but because now there was no uncertainty, no guessing, no wondering. We both knew, and somehow that changed everything. When we arrived outside my apartment, neither of us moved immediately. Luis rested his hands on the steering wheel, looking forward, then at me, then forward again. I started laughing. What? You? What about me? You're nervous. His eyes widened. I am not. You are. Luis groaned. This is embarrassing. A little. Thanks for the support. Anytime, he laughed, then looked at me again. The playful expression faded, leaving something warmer behind, something real. I'm glad I met you, Jude. The words hit harder than they should have, because I knew he meant them. Every single one. I smiled. I'm glad I met you too. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Luis smiled slowly, and I had a feeling that whatever came next was going to change everything. The next few weeks felt different. Not dramatically different, just better. Luis and I still met at the gym almost every day. We still teased each other constantly. He still talked too much. I still pretended to be annoyed by it. But now there was something underneath all of it. Something neither of us had to guess about anymore. The flirting wasn't accidental. The smiles weren't accidental. And the way we'd started finding excuses to spend time together definitely wasn't accidental. One Saturday morning, Luis convinced me to join him for a hike. A sentence that would have sounded ridiculous 2 months earlier. You hate hiking. I don't hate hiking. You hate leaving your apartment. That's different. It really isn't. Yet somehow, I still ended up in his car at 8 in the morning. The trail was about an hour outside the city. Nothing extreme, just a scenic route through the hills. The weather was perfect. The views were incredible. And unfortunately, Luis knew exactly how much I was enjoying myself. You're smiling again, I groaned. please stop tracking my facial expressions. Never. You need a hobby. You are my hobby. I nearly stumbled. Luis laughed so hard he had to stop walking. That wasn't funny. It absolutely was. I shook my head, trying and failing not to smile. By lunchtime, we'd reached an overlook near the top of the trail. The city stretched across the horizon. The sky was clear, the breeze was cool. It was one of those moments that felt oddly peaceful. Luis sat beside me on a large rock. For once, neither of us spoke. We just enjoyed the view. After a while, he nudged my shoulder. "Can I tell you something?" I laughed. "You always do." "Fair." His smile softened. Then he looked out toward the horizon. I haven't stopped thinking about our first date. My heart immediately sped up. "Really? Really?" I looked over. Luis wasn't joking, wasn't teasing. He looked genuinely thoughtful. I was nervous. That surprised me. "You?" "Yes, me." "I don't believe that." He laughed. I was terrified. "No chance." "Liar." "I'm serious." He shook his head, then smiled. "You have no idea how many times I almost canceled." I stared at him. "Why?" Luis looked at me. "Because I really liked you." The words landed somewhere deep in my chest. Simple, honest. Luis had a way of doing that. No games, no dramatic speeches, just the truth. And somehow, that always meant more. I smiled. "You hit it well." "No," he laughed. "I absolutely did not." "Okay, fair point." For the next hour, we talked about everything. Past relationships, embarrassing stories, dream vacations, future plans. The kind of conversations that slowly make someone feel less like a crush and more like a real part of your life. And somewhere during that conversation, I realized something. I wasn't just falling for Luis because he was charming, or funny, or attractive. I was falling for him because of how easy everything felt around him. Because he listened. Because he cared. Because being with him felt natural. Like we'd somehow skipped years of awkwardness and gone straight to understanding each other. The realization was both comforting and terrifying. Mostly terrifying. When we finally headed back toward the city, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Apparently, Luis couldn't either, because halfway through the drive, he glanced over. "You're thinking." That made me laugh. "How do you know that?" "Your serious face." "I have a serious face?" "You absolutely have a serious face." I rolled my eyes. Luis smiled. Then his expression softened. "What are you thinking about?" For once, I answered honestly. "You." The silence that followed lasted only a second, but it felt important. Luis looked genuinely caught off guard. Then a slow smile spread across his face, one I'd never seen before. Warm, almost shy, and completely real. "Good." I laughed. "Good?" "Yeah." He looked back at the road, still smiling. "Because I've been thinking about you too." Neither of us said much after that. We didn't need to. Some moments don't need extra words. By the time he dropped me off that evening, one thing felt obvious. Whatever this was between us had become something neither of us expected when we first met at the gym. It wasn't casual anymore. It wasn't just attraction. It was becoming something bigger, something real. And as I watched Luis smile at me from the driver's seat before pulling away, I realized something else. I couldn't imagine my life without him in it anymore. And that thought was both the scariest and best realization I'd had in a very long time. The realization stuck with me. I couldn't imagine my life without Luis in it anymore. And once that thought settled in, it became impossible to ignore. For weeks, we'd been building towards something, not through grand gestures, not through dramatic confessions, just through hundreds of small moments, workout sessions, late night texts, bad jokes, long conversations. The kind of things that slowly become important before you even realize they're happening. And now here we were, somewhere between friends and something more. Neither of us pretending anymore. A few days after the hike, the gym challenge finally came to an end. 30 days, countless workouts, way too many partner exercises, and approximately 5 million opportunities for Lewis to flirt with me. The gym hosted a final celebration that Friday evening. Nothing fancy, just music, food, prizes, and everyone congratulating themselves for surviving. Lewis found me within 30 seconds, as usual. There he is, I laughed. You really need a new opening line. Nope. He handed me a bottle of water, then stood beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. Neither of us moved. The event buzzed around us, people talking, music playing, someone giving a speech nobody was listening to. But honestly, the only person I was paying attention to was Lewis. Apparently he felt the same way, because after a few minutes, he leaned closer. Bored? A little. Want to escape? I smiled. Absolutely. 5 minutes later, we were outside, walking through the warm evening air. The city lights glowed around us. For a while, we just wandered. No destination, no rush, just enjoying being together. Eventually, we ended up at a small park a few blocks away. The same kind of place you'd walk past without noticing during the day. But at night, it felt peaceful, quiet. We sat on a bench overlooking a small pond. For once, Luis wasn't talking, and somehow that got my attention immediately. You okay? He looked over. Yeah. You're thinking. Luis laughed. Now who's doing it? Fair. The smile lingered on his face, then faded slightly, and suddenly I knew something important was coming. I have a confession. I immediately became suspicious. That sounds dangerous. It might be. I turned toward him. Luis rubbed the back of his neck, a habit he'd never completely lost. And somehow seeing him nervous still surprised me. What is it? He looked at me, really looked at me, then smiled softly. The first day I came to the gym, I laughed. You're bringing this up again? Yes, of course you are. Luis ignored me. I almost walked away. That caught me off guard. What? I saw you. He shrugged. You looked busy. I stared at him. Luis. What? You literally talked to me 5 minutes later. I know. Then what stopped you? His smile widened slightly. You laughed. I blinked. What? You laughed at me. Now I was laughing. That's what convinced you? Yep. That's ridiculous. Maybe. Luis looked down briefly, then back at me. But it was real. The honesty in his voice hit me harder than I expected, because that was always the thing about him. Beneath all the confidence and jokes, Luis was genuine, and that was probably what I'd fallen for first, even if I hadn't realized it. The silence stretched comfortably between us, neither of us in a hurry to break it. Finally, Luis spoke again, his voice quieter now. "You changed my life, Jude." My chest tightened, not because the words were dramatic, because I knew he meant them, every single one. I looked at him, the guy who had crashed into my routine and completely turned it upside down. The guy who somehow made ordinary days feel better. The guy who never stopped finding reasons to make me smile. The guy who had become the best part of my week without me noticing. Maybe he'd changed my life too. Actually, I knew he had. "You changed mine too." For a second, neither of us moved. Neither of us looked away. The city seemed quieter, the world smaller, just us. Luis smiled, that same smile I'd noticed on the first day, the dangerous one, except now it felt familiar, like home. "Good," I laughed. "Good? Very good." I shook my head. Some things never changed. And honestly, I hoped they never would. We sat there talking for another hour, about nothing, about everything. Future trips, future plans, the challenge, the gym, the ridiculous way we'd met. And somewhere during that conversation, I realized something else. The best relationships don't usually arrive with fireworks. They arrive quietly, one conversation at a time, one laugh at a time, one unexpected person at a time, until suddenly they're part of your life, and you can't remember what things looked like before. A few months earlier, Luis had been a stranger holding a dumbbell the wrong way. Now he was the person I wanted beside me, the person I looked for first, the person who somehow made every day brighter. Not because life suddenly became perfect, but because I didn't have to do it alone anymore. As we finally stood to leave, Luis bumped his shoulder against mine. A familiar gesture now. Comfortable. Easy. "Ready to go?" I smiled. "Yeah." Together, we headed back toward the city lights. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about routines, or schedules, or plans. I was simply happy. And with Luis walking beside me, that felt like the easiest thing in the world.